In 1848, a New York prison warden by the name Richard Dugdale was intrigued by the fact that 6 of the prisoners came from one family. He decided to find out where they came from, and he was able to track them down to a family of a man by the name Max Jukes. Then they realized that Max Jukes, together with his wife, had 6 daughters and 2 sons. They themselves were incarcerated in prison a couple of times because of disorderly behavior in the streets of New York. And then they decided in that research to take a sample of 1,200 of their descendants, and they found out the following details. 52.4% of all girls born in that family ended up as prostitutes. 310 of them were paupers and homeless. 300 of them died before the age of 30. 180 were alcoholics, and 160 were drug addicts. 150 of them were incarcerated in prison for an average of 13 years each. 67 of them had died to syphilis, then a killer disease, and 7 of them had committed murder. All of them from one family. But during the same period, they decided to study the family of a contrasting gentleman by the name Thomas Jonathan, then president of Preston University, married to one woman, his wife Sarah, for 31 years until the day she died. They had 11 children, and they took a sample of 1,400 of their descendants and found out the following details. 13 of them ended up as college presidents. 66 of them became university professors, and another 66 of them were physicians. 75 of them either ended up serving in the army or in the navy, and 85 of them had written classic books that were selling throughout North America. 100 of them were attorneys, including 3 U.S. state judges. And another 80 of them served in senior public office, including 3 governors, 3 senators, 1 comptroller of the U.S. Treasury, and the 3rd Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr, who served under President Thomas Jefferson. 2 families living the same time, contrasting results generations after them. That was 1884. I wonder what the statistics would reveal today in the year 2016. Chances are the statistics would be mind-boggling. I want to suggest at this early stage that our father's influence goes to the 4th generation after him. While there is little you can do about your ancestors, there is something you can do about your descendants. While you can't rewrite your history, you can remake your destiny. And this is the reason I want to suggest, whether you are a single mom, whether you are a potential parent, what I'm going to share tonight with you will help you, because any child in your neighborhood is your child. They look up to you to decide their conduct. When I was growing up, any parent in the neighborhood could discipline me for doing the wrong thing. When I was growing up, I would stand up when a teacher was passing by. I would be punished for untucking my shirt, for unkempt hair, for long nails, for making noise in class. When I was growing up, there was only one TV station in this great nation, which used to open somewhere around, do you remember? Was it 5 o'clock in the morning? And close about 11 o'clock. Today the channels in your house can't be numbered. Some Nigerians and Italians and Americans visit your house on that screen when you go to work. I know you don't know them, your house girl knows them. Today, the challenges are many and complex. In our high schools, this will range from lesbianism to homosexuality, to arson, to molesting teachers, to drug and substance abuse, even trafficking them. Kids are being incarcerated in prison. The challenges are overwhelming, and parental today is not for the weak and the faint-hearted. But I want to humbly suggest I am not bringing expert advice tonight. I'm one of you. I'm a seeker after the truth. You know, I read something from a guy by the name John Wilmot. He said, before I had children, I had 6 theories about how to raise children. Now I have 6 children and no theory at all. So I'm one of you. I'm a seeker after the truth. But I've had the privilege, unlike most of you, of speaking about parenting in no less than 100 sessions. I've had the privilege of researching on the same and documenting a book on the same. So I'll try to share with you some of the experiences I have found across this country and elsewhere. And I'm going to share with us tonight some 12 principles which I believe if you're going to follow this prescription, it will safeguard the future of your children. Number one, great fathers understand their children. Great parents understand their children. In the Olympic of 1968 in Mexico, John Stephen was sent by his country, Tanzania, to present them in the marathon. When he was on the 19th mile, he injured his knee so badly that he couldn't run. In over an hour later, he was approaching the finishing line. The journalist went over to him and asked him, John Stephen, how come you kept on running after the medals were already awarded and the race was already finished? And he looked straight into the eyes of the journalist and said, excuse me, gentlemen and ladies, when my country sent me to this country and paid the air ticket, they never sent me here to compare myself with the other athletes. They sent me here to finish the race. And I want us to pick a lesson or two from that story because I realized long ago that every parent in Kenya used to be number one. Number two parents are in Uganda. Don't you know that? I also realized that all our children are well behaved. The child who misleads our children is our neighbor's child. I've been looking for your neighbor for so long. And because we used to be number one, we push our children to be A students. Because our parents told us if you get a good grade, you can secure a good job. And a good job means a good future. So when they are 3 or 4 or 5 years of age, the mother pushes the brother, the sister, hey, you're going to finish food before your brother or your sister, as though there was some scarcity of food in that house. And the child grabs the food as fast as the mother advised. One day they grow up, they become the governor of Nairobi, and then they remember the words of the mama, you're going to grab before your brother eats. You complain without knowing you are the mentor. We taught them to compete. How many here would confess one day they were driving, let's say to Nakuru, and then somewhere after Odero, there was another car behind you. The guy stepped on the accelerator and passed you. You felt so bad that you decided to step on your accelerator to show him you also have a car. And you started chasing after this guy, and then when you reach somewhere near the Maimayo Junction, the guy turned left. He wasn't going to Nakuru after all. You're in a race with someone who did not know. How many are guilty? Please. You see, in the race of life, we join this highway at different times, at different paces. We exit at different paces. And the idea I want to suggest today is to finish the race. We shouldn't push our child to be number one. We should be pushing them to finish their race. Let me ask you a question. Do you honestly believe that the child who used to be number one in your class in primary school or high school, academically speaking, they are doing the best in life today? Is that necessarily the case? Not quite. Talk to me if you can. Talk to me if you can. The master was going on a distant land. Let me see whether you can remember the story. He decided to give some talents to his servants. The first servant was given some 5 talents. I want to ask you guys, he worked very hard, returned how many in total? How many in total? 10. And the master said, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter ye into the joy of the Lord. Let me talk to this group now. Then there was a second servant who was given some 2 talents. He worked very hard. Returned how many in total? 4. Thank you. And the master said, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter ye into the joy of the Lord. Notice, they didn't perform equally, but they were commended equally. Because the master didn't endow them equally, he didn't expect equal returns on his investment. Let me suggest there's a child who do well in music and swimming and basketball and academics, and is a class prefect. There's another child, if they attempt to do the 5 I have mentioned, they are going to flop in all of them. Your job as a parent is to create an enabling environment for that child to identify their gift. Their maker didn't endow them equally. By God's grace, I've had the privilege of speaking to students in more than 500 schools. And one of the top 3 complaints is that mom compares me with my sister. You are not like your brother. You are not like your sister. Let me say, the child was not supposed to be like the brother. They were not supposed to be like the sister. There's a race set before us. Your task as a parent is to help the child to identify their pace, not to run on the fast lane, but to run on their track. The overwhelming majority of you are working in the corporate world where there is cutthroat competition. There are terms like beating competition. And you discuss these terms in the boardroom and you throw them down the throat of your children without censoring it. Then there was a guy who was given 1 talent. He worked very hard, returned how many? 1. Then he began to accuse the master. And he said, I knew you are hard, master. You're like reaping where you did not sow. Then the master said, why didn't you give my money to KCB or Equity or Barclays or Standard Chartered? I would have gotten it back with some interest. Go to hell where there is gnashing and wailing of teeth. Your Bible doesn't have that word hell. But I do know where there is wailing and gnashing of teeth is hell. The Bible never says he committed murder. The Bible never says he committed adultery. He went to hell courtesy of laziness. You will be held accountable for the gifts and the talents that God gave you. And that's the message you must say to your child, so that they learn how to work at home and at school and succeed in both. Teach them to attend to home chores, even as they do their homework, because they have the capacity to attend all. For the benefit of those who go to church only during Christmas, this story is in Matthew 25. Principle number 2, protect your child. Protect your child. On January the 24th, the year 2004, I had the rare chance of speaking to students at the Stream School on the theme Dream Killers. At the end of my presentation, a young man came over to me and said, thank you, sir, for your encouraging words of wisdom, but I've already forfeited my dream career. Why is that? I asked him. And the young man said, you know, when we were in Form 1, one of our teachers asked us what we would like to do in life. And I said, I'd like to be a journalist, specifically reading news in prime hour. No sooner had the class ended than one of the boys came over to me and said, excuse me, you just can't read news. What's wrong with you? Ever gone to the TV, look at how the TV guys look like, and then get back to the media and look at yourself squarely? Do you realize there's no media house that can employ you even if you pay them to employ you? And the boy forfeited his dream career. In a school not so far from there, I was speaking to Form 2 boys on sexuality. At the end of my talk, a boy came over to me and said, sir, I'm hated by my classmates. I asked him why. He said, they say I have a big nose. To be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, I never realized the size of that boy's nose. But I've got some good news for you. It's about 6 years now since he graduated from the University of Nairobi, and the size of his nose has not yet changed. I learned from that event, boys with low self-esteem are highly vulnerable to violence or violent language trying to prove they're still around. Often than not, when you see a boy bullying the others in school, they are trying to express themselves. Boys with high self-esteem need not prove their manhood to anyone. They recognize it doesn't reside in the abundance of their muscles. They are comfortable with themselves. Girls with low self-esteem are highly vulnerable to sexual promiscuity, looking for approval, looking for affirmation. Girls with high self-esteem need not to prove their beauty to anyone. They don't need any dude in the street to confirm they're beautiful because they had the word love for the first time from their fathers. It is your duty as a father to form an emotional edge around your children so that they don't need to seek it elsewhere. Because elsewhere, although the word spoken is love, they are speaking lust in their hearts. Protect your children emotionally. Why? Children below the age of 10 speak pure truth uncensored. Unlike adults, they don't have the decorum that you and I have. So if one among them is too far, they just say it as they feel like. Wewe ni mnono sana, utakuwa farasi yetu, beba sasa tubebe pa 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 pa. When they're teenagers, especially girls, they tear each other in school day in, day out based on the title of their father, based on the size of their house and where it's located, based on their hairdos or makeups or makeothers, based on their definition of beauty. It is your job as a parent to reassure them about their future so that they don't always focus on what they don't have and they begin to focus on what they do have, so that they can count on their blessings, not on their limitations, so that they can appreciate in this life. You can't have everything you want, but you can achieve the one thing that you're looking for. You are able to go down to your child's level because the greater the person, the more they are able to come down. If you're not able to come down to the child's level, you are too small. In the creation story, we see God coming down looking for fallen man. We don't see Adam looking for God. In the story of Christ, we see God coming in the flesh looking for you and me. The greater person is able to come down to the lesser. Go down to that child's level and protect them emotionally. Principle number 3. Train your child. Train your child. Let me first suggest there's a fundamental difference between teaching and training. In training, you don't tell people what to do, you lead them in what to do. We have trains in Kenya, and a train is nothing more but the engine of the locomotive. Everything else hooked up to the train. In the British language, they call them wagons. In America, they call them cars. They can be 3 or 20 or 100. The idea behind the English word train means whenever the engine moves, the wagons follow. They don't choose. If it turns right, they all turn right. If it turns left, all the wagons turn left. Fathers, to train means if you reach home 1 o'clock in the morning drunk, you are telling your son to reach home 3 o'clock drunk. This is the way. Walk ye in it. To train means if you are beating their mother, you are telling your son, don't leave it at the beating level. Fracture her leg. I've set the pattern for you. Mothers, if you're arrogant and rude with your husband, you're telling your daughter to despise marriage, to defy authority when she gets married. She ends up being single and you wonder why. You are the cause. In training, you don't tell people what to do, you lead them in what to do. In that great city of Antioch, they never called themselves Christians. The city dwellers observed their mannerisms and their walk and their talk, and they said, they talk like Christ. They walk like Christ. They behave like Christ. They relate like Christ. They are like Christ. They are Christ-like. They are Christians. That's why the term was pronounced for the first time. I don't believe people hate Christ. I believe they hate the Christ you and me have been displaying, a jealous Christ, a malicious Christ. Some parishioners mentioned Francis of Assisi had asked him, sir, How should we preach? He replied, preach all the time. If necessary, use words. In the words of General Douglas MacArthur, the most popular general in U.S. military history, a good general does not push his soldiers from behind. He leads them from in front. I'll never forget hearing the story of a girl who was sent home courtesy of smoking. A true story from Kenya, not the Netherlands, the first nation to legalize cocaine. A true story from Nairobi. 2 weeks later, she comes back to school with her mama. And the mother gets into her handbag and bumps some 2 cigarettes, lights a cigar and the daughter's cigar, pass the smoke to the principal, and then asks the principal, what are you talking about? In yet another school familiar with the majority of you just here in town, a girl was sent home because she was given a skirt by the school, and the civilized girl she is, or at least though she was, she decided to trim it to size. And the principal did what principals have done since the beginning of times, sent her home to regain her sanity. She comes back to school with her mama, and the principal looks at the mother's skirt, daughter's skirt, mother's skirt, daughter's skirt. Suddenly, the spirit of wisdom came upon the principal, and the principal said, your daughter has deteriorated in academics. I mean, what would you say if you are the principal that day? Charity begins at KICC, is that so? If charity begins at home, parents will not be telling children what to do, they will be leading them in what to do. After this meeting, don't tell them what I'm saying, show them what I'm saying. Don't be a travel agent to your children, pointing to places, moral direction you've never been. You must duplicate yourself. By God's grace, I've been blessed with 2 children, Ivy and Zig. If you talk to them for 5 minutes, my name is Kinyanjui. If you talk to any of them for 5 minutes, you are going to notice some Tonyajuis. In fact, I go for meetings with Zig and Ivy because I want to expose them to what I'm doing. Immediately after the meeting, they pick my microphone and they start mimicking what I was saying. You see, kids have never been gifted in listening at your words, but they are super gifted at copying your life. They are like tape recorders, watching your every move. We speak what we know. We reproduce who we are. We reproduce our type. We reproduce our kind. Lead your children from the front. Principle number 4, connect with your child. Great fathers connect with your children.